Yeah, welcome back to LaunchPad Consultancy's Parenting Conference. And as promised, we have the Single Fathers Association of Trinidad and Tobago joining us for our segment 2. Now, of course, the vision of the Single Fathers Association is to be the leading advocate and support network for equitable parental rights in Trinidad and Tobago, with a mission towards enabling fathers to participate equitably in parenting and children. They are driven by the guiding principles being result-driven, service-oriented, transparency, accountability, and participatory decision-making. Joining us this evening, we're honored to have none other than Mr. Wendell Grant, Director and Outreach Officer of the Single Fathers Association, as he shares with us this evening on discipline in parenting. So let's put our hands together as we welcome Mr. Grant to share with us.
Good evening, Trinidad and Tobago. Good evening, everyone. Cultivating discipline among our children. How do we cultivate discipline among children? Where do we begin? In Trinidad especially, we often associate discipline with licks. Recently we've been hearing that licks is really a form of child abuse. And I agree with that. We need to understand that while it is true that discipline carries an aspect of penalty for infractions of the rules laid down by parents as well as the society, we must also understand that there are many forms in which penalties can be applied without the big stick approach. You see, we live in a very retributive society. If we look around, the way policing is set up, the way the judiciary is set up, the way the school and education system is set up, there seems to be a penalty for almost everything around us. And that had its origin somewhere, and we need to find the origin of these retributive approaches and treat with it. I'm sure that you've often heard the statement, do not spare the rod and spoil the child. I want to tell you today that the rod in that statement was not speaking of beating or abusing a child. You see, the big stick approach is not what the intent of that statement was meant. They didn't mean for us to take a big stick approach when that statement was made. However, it was speaking of accountability. Spare not the rod and spoil the child was speaking about holding the child accountable for his or her actions. So let me state emphatically that the Single Fathers Association of Trinidad and Tobago do not support child abuse. We do not support beating children. What we do support is holding our children accountable for their actions. I'm a Bible school student. And when I went to Bible college, I learned a principle. And that principle was that accountability, discipleship is accountability on the basis of a loving relationship with intentional training. In other words, we develop a relationship with a person through love with an intention to train that person. So how do we cultivate discipline among children? I want to first look at what the root meaning of the word discipline is. You see, Discipline comes from the word disciple, disciplos, the Latin word for pupil. In other words, a student. Yes? Which also provides the source for the word disciple. And what is a disciple? A disciple is a follower of someone else, a follower of a particular teaching or a particular teacher. Therefore, in order to cultivate discipline among our children, we must first be disciplined ourselves. And that is one of the problems that we have in Trinidad and Tobago. We expect children to be disciplined. We expect children to behave in a disciplined manner, but the parents themselves are not disciplined. We could see it. We have social media now. Everyone is carrying a smartphone, and so we are seeing, we are witnessing just how disciplined adults in our society is. But yet we expect our children to behave in a disciplined manner. You see, a child needs to be brought up, trained up, educated, guided, counseled, and prepared to become a responsible, respectful, productive, successful adult and citizen of our society. That's what we expect of our children. But you don't produce that type of individual, you don't produce that type of citizen by beating a child. You produce that type of citizen by holding your children, our children, accountable. We produce that type of citizens by teaching our children what consequences are. When I am a single parent, I've been a single parent for over 20 years. I've raised 2 girls and 1 boy by myself. I am in the truest sense a single parent because I did it single-handedly without any outside input. No mother, no aunts, no uncles, because I wanted to control what my children learned, what they were exposed to. I monitored everything closely. My parenting style, I considered it to be calculative and decisive. And I did not allow any interference from anyone. And I believe that is the way that children need to be parented in order for us to cultivate discipline in our children. So let's look at ourselves as parents. Are we living what we are saying to our children? There's a train of thought that says, do as I say, but not as I do. And I see that rampant within our society. So we tell our children, do what I say otherwise, but what is the example that we are demonstrating as parents? Are we demonstrating the discipline that we expect to see our children manifest? And I would say, in the larger percentage of parents, the answer is no. Let's look at our leaders, the leaders of our nation. What is the example that our leaders are demonstrating to our children? I have a son that is 11 years old, and he, because I went before the Joint Select Committee of the Parliament, he looks at the Parliament channel and he questions me. He calls me Papi. He says, Papi, why are they always misbehaving like that? That's the example that our children are seeing from our leaders. If my son at 10, 11 years old can comprehend that something is wrong with what he is seeing, he knows that the Parliament building and the MPs inside there are supposed to be serious about the business of running the country, and he is not seeing what he thinks he should be seeing, and he questions it. Why are they misbehaving? I have seen where our Prime Minister was in an interview, and the journalist asked him a question, and he said, "What happened to you? You need glasses? What you talking about?" Right? And that to me, that was a disrespect. I don't even answer my son like that. I don't answer my children. I don't get angry. And this is the leader of our nation. This is the example that our children are looking at. That is indisciplined behavior. But we expect our children, and this is the same Prime Minister who came afterwards and says that we are sending monsters to school. So you demonstrate monstrous behavior, but you don't expect our children to come to school and behave like monsters. So how do we cultivate discipline in our children if we are not demonstrating discipline ourselves? So let's look at the church leaders and the church members. Our children's eyes are upon the adults. So we need to start, we need to begin at the place of demonstrating what we want to produce in our children. I always tell people that children are firstly a reflection of their parents, and secondly, a reflection of the adult citizens of our country. Children cannot train themselves. Children cannot raise themselves. Children cannot discipline themselves. There's a verse in the biblical scripture that says, foolishness is bound in the heart of the child, but the rod of correction will drive it far away. And again, I want to reiterate that the rod of correction here is not a big stick. The rod of correction here is holding that child accountable for his or her actions. Teaching the child reward and for good behavior and consequences for bad behavior. That's how I grew up my children. But if as adults we do not demonstrate discipline, how can we expect our children to be disciplined? So I want to touch now on the family of origin, right? The family of origin refers to the significant caretakers and siblings that a person grows up with, or the first social group a person belongs to, which is often a person's biological family or an adoptive family. I believe that we need to create greater awareness of the impact of the family of origin upon the life of a child. You see, we assume we are kind of on automatic, we're not using manual here when it comes to raising children. And we really do need to use a manual, I believe. We need to have a manual on how to raise children. We need to teach people in school how to go about parenting. Do you know that nobody teaches you how to become a man or a woman in school? That's not on the curriculum. Do you know that nobody teaches you how to prepare to be a husband or a wife? That's not on the curriculum. They don't even teach you how to be a good human being. And we say that we're sending our children to school to become educated. Yes, they go to school to learn academia. But we as parents, we have a responsibility to educate our children. Education is not academia only. Education must be holistic, and the family of origin has a responsibility, has a part to play in teaching that child discipline. So if the family of origin, all sorts of things are going on inside there, all sorts of indiscipline, all sorts of compromising behavior, all sorts of unacceptable language and behavioral patterns, what is going to be downloaded into that child? You could tell that child how much you want. You could read volumes to that child. Have that child read volumes. If you are not demonstrating as a parent discipline, your child is not going to turn out to be a disciplined child. And we need to understand the impact that the family of origin, you see what is happening outside there, you see that mess, children fighting in school, you see that mess, crime, and all sort of behavior, unacceptable behavior in the society, that came from right inside of the house. I often hear people saying that the government is responsible for crime, and the government is responsible for this, that, and the other. If people get the government that they deserve, I always say that. However, I believe that in Trinidad, we have a people problem. And the reason why we have a people problem is because nobody cultivated discipline among our children. So we have the old generation that grew up without discipline. Discipline was the big stick, right? You do something that your parents did not approve of, they beat you into submission, they beat you into silence, and they tell you don't do it again. Some parents didn't even teach you why not to do it. They just told you don't do it. You didn't even get an explanation as to why you should not do what they're telling you not to do. That's not cultivating discipline. Cultivating discipline takes time, it takes knowledge, it takes patience, it takes wisdom. People got to understand that the greatest negative impact that takes place upon a young child's life takes place right there inside of the child's home, within the family of origin. The first place that a child is abused is in the home by his or her parents. The thing that they call discipline, the first place they are abused is right there. Under the disguise of discipline, we are abused, we are beaten. Some of us, they deny us food, they deprive us of food as a form of discipline. All sorts of things, tricks and schemes they use under the disguise of discipline. We need to understand and become aware of the impact of the family of origin upon children. We need to be leaders. We need to address leadership from the level of our homes, leadership from the level of our communities, leadership from the level of the country, the government, the rulers, those that are in power. Because our children are looking at the adults. Children don't look to each other for examples. Children look to the grown-ups for examples. We need to understand that in order to cultivate discipline in our children and to produce good citizens for our nation, we need to start with ourselves. We have a crisis right now, bullying taking place in school. We have indiscipline, teenage sexual activities, all of these things. We have violent behavior. We have aggression in this country like I have never seen before. As I drive on the road, I am confronted with aggression on a daily basis. You don't get courtesy on the road. If that is the example of discipline that we are demonstrating to our children, how can we cultivate discipline into them? So I am supposed to speak about cultivating discipline into children. But to cultivate discipline to children, we have to start with the adults. Because we could say to the child, we could give them an entire encyclopedia of rules and regulations, and if we don't demonstrate it, they will follow us, not the book that they read. Yes? The person who leads or commands a group, organization, or country is a leader. The person who leads or commands over the home is a leader. So when we see, what does a leader do? A leader leads and others follow. So when we look at our children, there's only one question that begs to be asked. What kind of leaders do we have? We need role models. What kind of role models do we have? When I'm looking at television, I see people talking about the Calypsonians as role models, the footballers as role models, the cricketers as role models, and all of these people are role models. But let's look at their character. If we do not, our role models are not people of sound character that our children can follow their discipline, how will our children become disciplined? The first place that discipline, we need to cultivate discipline. We need to begin within the family of origin. And then, when we produce good children, when we produce good future citizens, they will flow out into our community and they themselves will reproduce. There is a scripture that speaks in creation about reproducing after our own kind. So the mango tree reproduces mangoes, not pomerac. You can't go under the mango tree and pick up a pomerac. So in like manner, when we were growing up, we would often hear that the fruit don't fall far from the tree, or the chip don't fall far from the block. And now we are seeing that. Now we are witnessing that. Now we are feeling the effects of that within our society. It is negatively impacting our society. We need to understand that in order to cultivate discipline, we must first begin with ourselves. When we demonstrate discipline, the discipline that we want to see in our children, when we demonstrate it as adults, our children will follow. So many times I've heard people saying, well, you make the child, but you didn't make the child's mind. While that may bear some truth to it, the development of that child's mind also heavily depends on the example that we are demonstrating to that child. The child is not exposed firstly to the neighbor's household. The child is exposed to the household that the child is born into. We need to understand that just as we teach our children to move from drinking milk into eating food, the same way we teach our children from being cared for continuously and cradled, we teach them to creep, and then we teach them to walk. We also need to teach them to be accountable, because accountability is the essence of discipline. Yes? So in order to cultivate discipline among our children, we must first cultivate discipline among ourselves. Many times I've spoken with parents, with individuals who have been doing things in a particular manner, and people would say they're old and set in their ways. And when you try when I try to enlighten them concerning the use of the rod as discipline, when I try to get them to understand that beating a child is not disciplining a child, but holding the child accountable for his or her action, some of them just refuse to accept it because they have been doing it that way all their lives. They have seen their parents do it that way, and they have seen their parents before them, before those parents do it that way. And so we have dissonance. People reject new information. They reject the teaching or the encouragement to do things differently. Today we have a lot of rights, a lot of charters being made and written into law We have, especially when it comes to children's rights, and even in our own country now, there's a ban on corporal punishment. And yet still at home, you hear parents, even on social media, you see people in groups and chats saying, nobody can stop me from beating my child. And they take beating to mean discipline. We need to rethink our position as parents. We need to rethink our position as citizens of this beloved country and take a different approach when it comes to discipline. I hope that what I am saying people understand. You could hate the messenger, I don't mind, but please receive the message. We have, I would like to let everyone know that we have at the Single Fathers Association, we have an app that is available on Google Play, free of charge for those who have Android devices. You can download the app. All the frequently asked questions are there. We have contact information, contact numbers, different outreach officers in different areas, and working with different types of scenarios as well. Also, if when you use the app, you are not satisfied or you do not get the answers that you're looking for, you can contact one of the officers. We also have all our social media links on the app. And can you see that there? Right. So that's find us. We are on Facebook, we are on Pinterest, YouTube, and a couple others. Just type in Single Fathers Association of Trinidad and Tobago on Google Play, and you will find our email addresses also there. If you can't get in contact with an outreach officer, you can send us an email. You can also join, you can like the Facebook page, and you can join the Single Fathers chat group as well. Okay? Thank you.
So of course we are greatly appreciative of Mr. Grant for joining us for this segment of cultivating discipline among children. And even as he has shared, adults, we must remember as we cultivate discipline among our children, we are the leaders, they are following our example, and we encourage you to stay tuned. Thank you so much to the Single Fathers Association of Trinidad and Tobago. Be sure to like and share. Our next segment is coming soon as we have more great content for all you, our online family.